All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Claire Sturm. I'm filling in for Catherine Lawrence today. I'm a project coordinator with the SGCI, Science Gateways Community Institute. Just a quick reminder before we kick off today's webinar, make sure your audio is muted, except for our lovely presenters as they're going through the session today. And if you can also make sure to turn off your video since this is a recorded session. At any time, you're welcome to submit questions using the chat function, and I'll be moderating those questions as they come through and sharing them with the presenters as each one comes up to speak. Again, we'll be posting the slides for recording and also the recording on sciencegateways.org later. So stay tuned there. So a little bit about what we do with Science Gateways Community Institute. We support building and running gateways, offering training education scenarios like this one, and provide a network for communities to get together and talk about science gateways and the impact that we share together. Always looking forward to more conversations about the services that we provide and ways that we can help. So there's multiple ways to engage with us, and there's also some opportunities on the website to start a conversation with us if you're interested. With that, I'll go ahead and stop my screen so that way we can have Sandra take over the presentation from here. Today's webinar is going to be focused around how to support gateways via community building, joining the Science Gateways joining the Gateway Ambassadors community. So Sandra, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Claire. I would like to talk about Gateway Ambassadors and our new program to build this community of community builders. And so why are we thinking about this? And this is, yes, collaborations make really challenges to create solutions, technical solutions, less steep. And if you look at different science gateways or virtual research environments, however you call them, it could be a great visibility for the institution research activities. Like, for example, if we look at Apache Avata gives visibility to Indiana University, NanoHub and Hub0 NanoHub gives it to Purdue, Hub0 to San Diego Supercomputing Center now. And there could be some synergy between different projects working on frameworks or new technologies. If you have certain technologies used for, let's say, 2, 3, 4 projects, then the developers on this part don't have these high learning curves, and that can help to be faster setting up new solutions, and you can share cost, expertise, and resources across campus or distributed system teams. And so community building, when we talk about it, so let's say, for example, you want to share in a community advanced software and digital products. So you could probably then benefit from a science gateway, like, for example, here's Planting Science or NanoHub pictures of this. And maybe you need people with knowledge about data preservation, data lifecycle, and or with programming skills. So digital librarians on campus could be a good or great fit for the skill set. Or you look at machine learning, metadata, ontologists, statistics. So maybe your campus, or you have a distributed team of data scientists available who could work with you. Or HPC. So how to access HPC, how to set up virtual research environments, virtual machines. Maybe you work with containers or distributed data management. So a lot of campuses have HPC specialists. Or you would like to have help with the project management. So if you have a business department, the business specialist could be a great fit for this skill set. Only to talk a little bit about the diversity. And I really like this short cartoon or small cartoon, like, oh, we like to bring together people from radically different fields and wait for the friction to produce heat, light, and magic. Sometimes it takes a while. So that is the idea, to bring really totally different people together So, and the Gateway Ambassador, the goal is to have community builders, to create a network between people, experts, and resources, and that they are themselves members of a professional community, so that you can have community activities to learn from peers and share information, and have ambassador activities like meeting with individuals or hosting awareness sessions. And from here, so there are already a couple of initiatives. I don't go into detail for this because from here I would like to introduce our three speakers today. We have a mini panel who have already success stories with different focus and outreach measures to build on-campus teams or help on-campus resources. One is Annelie Rugg. We start off with Annelie Rugg from UCLA, then Julian Pistorius, and then Gwen Jacobs. And I give now the word to Annelie. Stop sharing and take it away.
Good morning, good afternoon. I'm going to share, let's see. I'm going to share my screen. And hopefully you can now see something called the Digital Research Consortium at UCLA.
Yes, we can see
Yes,
that.
you can. Okay, great. Thanks for confirming. Okay. So good. Hello, everyone. I'm coming to you from Los Angeles at UCLA. I'm actually not in my office because I'm called out from another event. I was double booked, but I really wanted to be here and share a little bit about what is becoming a consortial effort at UCLA around the support for digital research, particularly with the non-STEM field. So I am the director and humanities CIO at Humanities Technology. And so I have a keen interest in growing the community that we realize we really need to foster in order to make digital research for humanists possible on this campus, because the humanists really don't know where to go and how to pull all the pieces together, and things aren't as well established for them. And so this began as actually an initiative based in a space called the Scholarly Innovation Lab, which is one of the nodes in this Digital Research Consortium. And so that's what I wanted to share with you about in terms of our success building a community that was centered in a very modest space that happens to be based in our research library, and that's a kind of a key aspect of it. So I'm going to flip now to a couple of slides, and these will be shared with you all later. This began about almost 4 years ago. We were struggling to find a locus and establish a kind of a starting point, if you will, for people who were increasingly now seeking help and guidance and startup assistance, basically, for doing digital humanities and digital research work in the social sciences, in information studies, in arts and architecture. We have a lot of activity there. And there was a lot of cross-disciplinary interest that all centered around needing access to people with data, the kinds of skills that Sandra's already mentioned, and expertises. And there was an opportunity in the research library that had just been renovated on the ground floor with some open spaces, very modest, approximately 200 square feet, with nothing in it, but based in the research library. And I was on a tour, and the librarian at the time said, "We're looking for partners for the space. It's not designated yet." And I immediately thought, this could be our answer. And fast forward, it is now a collection of 3 joined spaces, which probably total about 600 square feet, maybe 500 square feet. They're not ideal for the needs that we have, but we've made them work. And they consist of a lockable space that's closed off and not visible, a lockable space that has all glass, and so people coming through the library can see what's going on. You get a little bit of that fishbowl aquarium kind of thing, and it makes the activity visible. And then an open space for presentation. And in that space, we have established what seems to be a thriving community that really wants to grow. And the key is that we have really held back on growth intentionally and managed the establishment of this community by doing what we are able to do with the resources that we have. And we have very little resources. So the key was to have this neutral space in the library, because at UCLA, as on many campuses probably, we're very distributed. We're not centralized. Our technology is not centralized. And yet with all of the transdisciplinary and cross-disciplinary work, there's a need to bring people together in a place where they feel welcome, no matter where they hail from. And so the research library makes a great deal of sense. So, and I apologize for the background noise. I'm not in my office today. So we were able to give substance to the community in this space, and then be a jumping off point to gather the resources and make them available such as we have them. It's a starting point. And it's open and it's non-specialized. And it's accessible outside business hours, so it's not just an 8 to 5 situation. I apologize for the noise. And that was key also. So formerly what we were doing was trying to support research scholars from different disciplines in our unit, which is designated for the humanities. And that really wasn't working because people didn't feel welcome. We were only open 8 to 5. We didn't allow food or drink, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to fast forward to the screen next, and I have to apologize. Oh, come on. I have to flip. Here we go. Okay, so I'll just do it that way. Can you now see something? Hopefully you can now see something called Startup Insights. So essentially what I wanted to share that has been successful for us is that with modest resources, with a very simple, undesignated, kind of clean and open to possibilities starting point, but with clear demand from and need for some kind of a place to direct people and to convene the resources and the expertise that we have, we established the Scholarly Innovation Lab. And it is very much what we've learned that has been successful about making this possible is that, fundamentally we have just done what we are able to do with what we have by making it community run. So there's very little, it's intentionally called a consortium at this point because we don't want it to feel administratively connected in any way with a particular budget or a particular organization. It's consortial and it's community run. And the idea is that we placed a person who is working there during business hours, essentially, but there every day, and he's a kind of a resident technologist. And that's been a key, finding a person with the right kind of welcoming personality, interpersonal skills, the right kind of broad skill set, and the knowledge of the resources on campus to whom people can come for an initial consultation. And they can just drop in or they can make an appointment. And from there, we accept any scholar who has a legitimate project need, and we really don't have a very high threshold for that. And we welcome them, we give them a door code to the lockable spaces, and we establish that what this is for you to share with others and the community, to use for your needs, to bring together for meetings, both remote and in person, and to be open to the cross-pollination that happens when you're rubbing elbows with other projects working in the space. And then we let people run it from there. It's self-cleaning. People have to contribute to the cleanup and the maintenance of the space, and they contribute to the scheduling, and they work it out amongst themselves. It has a minimal operational footprint. We don't have the staff to run an operation, really. We just have the one person. So it's really focused on the people and the collaboration and not the stuff or the service, right? So in the physical sense, there's no built-ins. Intentionally, everything's modular, movable, and flexible. We do have a couple of, they're kind of aging, high-powered desktops that we have networked together so they can do kind of some after-hours compiling. But essentially, that's the only built-in thing. And we have everything on carts, including kind of turnkey ability to connect with people in remote meetings, such as this one, so that people can meet with project partners and learn about science gateways and services and opportunities through remote connection as easily as they can in person. And then we just made clear that the purpose for this was for the community to meet, to convene, to have a designated place to go, to ask questions, to help each other, and to experiment and learn on site with the help that is available and seeking out connections across the campus from the community that's present. There's no budgetary home, and we really recommend kind of avoiding that and instead relying on agreements so that there's transparency around what expenses might be covered and with what funds, but not that this is belongs to a particular budget, because that, at least on our campus, leads to a sense of it's not for me, it's only for them, and we don't want the us and them mentality. And then another really key thing is just to be good at be what you are and be good at it. So in the digital humanities, as an example, and I'm sure this is true in all disciplines, where computation and research are going on together, there's so many different approaches being taken, so many new technologies being explored, as well as kind of enterprise standard ones. You can't possibly cover all bases, especially when you're starting up and with limited resources. So we just decided, well, we're good at, for example, 3D modeling. We have a lot of expertise in text analysis and network analysis and things like that. But we don't have a lot of particular expertise in GIS. We don't have a lot of expertise in high performance computing in our group. So we decided what we would do is make clear that we have expertise in the areas that we have, and connect and learn about where those expertises are available elsewhere on campus or on other campuses or in other communities. And then be that connecting point for the expertise that we can't provide on in-house, so to speak. And then simply just to grow slowly and driven by clear needs. So we are now we now have an associate dean who is tasked with trying to develop what this will become and how big we can support and sustain, and what funding will be needed. And we're considering things like maybe some modest grant proposals to bring in a postdoc and maybe a couple of graduate student researchers to work with the scholars in the space and to augment the expertise that we have there. And now that's not going to be permanent. That's going to be transient and temporary. It will come and go with the people as they come and go. But it's a way to explore how can we grow and meet further needs and kind of test out what do we need to bring in-house, so to speak, and argue for funding to do that. And then the other key thing that we've learned that we didn't actually do, so this is a mistake we made that we would recommend you don't do going forward, is actually define some success factors up front so that you know how you're going to capture data or evidence to show that you've been successful. Because we're at the key point now where this associate dean is going to have to make, negotiate and make a case for growing our consortium and bringing on additional participants through different schools and divisions to contribute people and resources. And so having evidence for the success and why we need to grow is really, really critical. So it's not just making grant proposals, it's also being able to articulate kind of in business terms, the cost benefit of investing in an effort like this, whether it's investing money or more importantly, investing people and their expertise. So I'm going to stop there. It's really just meant to be a very brief introduction, but I really wanted to emphasize that this has been driven by disciplines that don't typically think about in terms of high performance computing, although we do have digital humanists using our computing cluster on campus. But there is a growing need across all disciplines and wanting to work from humanities across into the sciences as well, whether it be medical humanities or environmental humanities or working with computer scientists and data scientists and high performance computing experts to do groundbreaking research in the humanities. And we're really excited about that. And we really found that this has been a really successful way to offer something real and effective for our scholars that they can count on and feel like they have support for. And I'll stop sharing now. Hopefully that worked. And I'm going to end by simply saying I apologize. I'm going to have to cut out, and I can't take questions right now because I'm needed elsewhere. But please, I put my email address in the chat, and I welcome any questions. And hopefully I'll be back on additional calls with the rest of you. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Annelie. So yeah, Mona and Jack, we will follow up then with Annelie that she can answer your questions. She had to go now to another meeting, but I was glad that she made it at all to present a little bit. So from this point, I would like to give it to Julian Pistorius to present his community building and the research bazaar.
Hi.
Julian?
Oh gosh, I hope. Hi, can you hear me? I'm going to share my screen. I've just suddenly realized I'm sitting in front of a whiteboard and I have no idea who wrote anything up there. So let's share my screen. Let's see. And so I am Julian Pistorius. I up until recently worked at Cybers as a software engineer on the cloud computing platform, and also I early in 2016, together with a colleague, Dr. Blake Joyce, and we started something called Research Bazaar here at Tucson, Arizona. We heard about it from somebody, well, actually, I heard about it from somebody at a conference, from some Australians, and it sounded just what I was looking for, so I'll jump into that. My selfish reasons I'll get to a bit later, but the ostensible reason now is how do we build a community on campus where people can mutually support each other, where there's a community of practice for people who are trying to do research, digital research that involves computational tools, when the vagaries of funding and the problems that go with that can make all these disparate efforts not as successful as they could be. And so what ended up with the Research Bazaar becoming a bit of an umbrella network, a network of networks, I guess, on campus, as well as off campus. We have a lot of members who show up from industry, from the Pima Community College, from people who are doing boot camps in web programming or data science. And we have an annual festival that's across the whole world at the various locations. It's usually 2 or 3 days where people present on things that they're interested in and what they're learning and tools that they find useful. And it's a focus point, but it's not everything that we do. The core of what we do is, at the moment, we have 3 weekly events here in Arizona. We have Coffee and Code on Tuesday mornings, Hacky Hour on Thursday afternoons, and then we've just reintroduced Shut Up and Write on Friday afternoons, where people can have some time to just write on their thesis or grant applications or whatever they need to do. And it culminates in something that we couldn't engineer, but it became a community, and it's something that it's become a focus for a lot of people's weekly lives. There's a pattern, there's a rhythm. You meet the same people, you talk about your terrible advisors and things like that. So I mentioned that it's across the world. So you can see there's Arizona on the left there. There's also an annual festival in Florida, Oslo, lots in Australia, New Zealand, and at one point there was a festival in Ecuador as well. So there's somebody in Oklahoma. Is it Oklahoma?
Yes.
Yeah, and Wisconsin. Yeah, so I think Wisconsin is putting on their first festival in, what were we saying, February? I think so. So watch this space. And then, so this is what our first festival looked like. It was outside. Some tents, people presenting, people hanging out. It was quite the time. I mentioned our weekly events. We have the Coffee and Code and the Hacky Hour. It's a mix of socializing and getting problems solved, and networking is quite fantastic. So Then, yeah, this is an example of a coffee and code meeting. This is a hacky hour, one of our early ones. So a lot of people get involved with Research Bazaar because they need help. Sometimes not with code, sometimes with how do I get through this thing called my PhD or whatever it is. But then people figure out that it's also a community. It's a place where they can find value and they can find a home for like-minded people. So my selfish reasons I mentioned at the beginning, I wanted to hang out with intelligent, nice people, and at the same time do some undercover research for how researchers use software, because I'm a software engineer, and I wanted to. There was not much of a culture that I could see of talking to our users, and so that was my sneaky way of hanging out with them and watching them see what problems they need to solve. And so we've learned some lessons. Helping people is a good way to start. There are a lot of people who need help, and then also do ask for help. So and then we've had lots of success with our librarians. Your librarians are a great resource, and they are the bridge. So when I first made these slides, I had on here, find more people and demonstrate value. And I don't think we had that problem. And I think a bit like Annelie, I think we grew sustainably. We never had any funding other than incidentals for festivals. And we like it that way. It's a core that feels real. We don't have to demonstrate value because we don't have the usual stakeholders. We have to just be a value to ourselves, to our community. The thing that we're currently learning, that we're dealing with, and that we're working on is how to add structure and yet keep the grassroots feel. We recently elected a first steering committee for how to make the organization, as it grows, still be responsive to the community and be able to grow sustainably. And so that's an interesting one. I think the carpentries have gone through something similar recently. So we're following their lead, and how do you set something up that is accountable? I stole these slides from the Science Gateways Institute video that they made. I think it was in 2012. So I apologize for the resolution on this. It was very much struck at home with me. So Blake and I started the Arizona branch of Research Bazaar, and many hacky hours, it was just Blake and me sitting having beers at Gentle Ben's or wherever it was. And eventually other people started joining. And we needed to realize that at some point, you need to have people you want to make it possible for people to contribute their effort, their ideas, make it theirs. And it's not just Blake's or not just mine. So this is odd thing that we're grappling with, is letting something go almost, and leaving and reducing your control over it, but in such a way that it maintains its feel and the value, but knowing that we can't do everything. So that's an interesting thing that we're dealing with at the moment. So lastly, I would just like to thank UITS, who pays Blake, Cybers, who used to pay me. I'm now at the College of Agriculture and Life Science. University of Arizona Libraries have been fantastic. And all my friends at Research Bazaar, especially Blake. So I think that's it for me.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Julian? I was
going to say Blake is also online. So Blake can also answer any questions where his different perspectives. So feel free to ask him as well.
So, for example, one number would be also interesting. So, how many already have, and how many participants do you have in these annual events?
Blake?
There we go. Hopefully you can hear me. So that first year, I think we had like 40 people. That was where we had the tents on the lawn. The second year we did the annual event, we had about 115 registrants and about 80 or 85 participants. I'll have to go and check those numbers. And then this past year, we actually rented out basically a whole floor of one of our buildings. Rented out. I mean, it's free, but and I think we had a little over 200 people register, and about 160 or so actually show up. It was a 3-day. We went to a 3-day format, so that's at least them coming for some amount of time on one of those 3 days.
Yeah, that is very cool. I mean, this is really impressive numbers for a yearly event. For this event, yeah.
Well, yeah, and I don't think that's by chance. I think, I'm a researcher, so we always joke that I'm the code curious biologist. Julian is the biology curious coder. And honestly, that kind of format exists, I think, everywhere. And in some ways or another, we realized really quickly that we were training people, with software carpentry or data carpentry. We were giving them 1-day workshops or 2-day workshops, or even if they were taking a class for 18 weeks. They learned general principles, but they had nowhere to go and actually apply those to their problem. And so I think that's why it jumped off so fast, is once they realized, oh, I can actually go sit down with someone who's going to help me solve my research problem and graduate. That spreads like wildfire. And that's why in such a short time it became, pretty popular.
Okay, cool. So thank you very much, and I'm sure we will have more discussions also later. So Gwen, are you available now? So our third speaker is Gwen for today, talking about how she builds community.
Great, I am here. Can you guys hear me okay? And I don't have
Yes,
any
I
slides.
can hear you.
I will, let's see. So, sorry, I was double booked on another call, and I'm just going to turn my attention to this. So, I thought what I would talk about today is some of our Science Gateway efforts and how we have some of our successes and the methods that we've used to engage researchers to use some of the tools that we've built. So a little background, I direct our Hawaii EPSCoR effort, and we have a large project to study water sustainability in Hawaii. And one of the goals was to create an aggregated kind of data repository for water data, for geophysical work, for geochemistry, and also for microbial populations. So one of the big major science goals of the project was to study, or continues to be, to study 2 of Hawaii's largest aquifers and to basically do a structure function analysis and build models. So it's a very extensive project with lots of students, lots of faculty, lots of moving parts. Now we, in the grant when we wrote it, we included a full Science Gateway implementation using the Agave platform. So we built something called the Ikibai Gateway, which Ikibai stands for water knowledge in Hawaiian. And what it has is a full data management suite, as well as computational platforms for running bioinformatics analyses and other kinds of computational things. Also, a kind of a research workbench for folks to use the tools. And then also we have dissemination points for some of our data products for the project. So, and many of you know Sean Cleveland, who works in my group. Sean has been the leader in this whole effort, and we leveraged a previous award that we had in collaboration with our pals at TAC on the Agave platform. So we came into this with a well understood kind of idea of the kind of platform that we were going to build and what the users' needs were. So it's been fascinating working with these different sets of faculty, because some of them, and especially within those that do things like water sampling and isotope analysis, I guess this isn't a surprise. It's never been a surprise to me, but just the fact that teaches students how to manage their data in graduate school, nor do they make this a priority. So this has been a challenge, even though we have a very nice platform for folks to work on. They can't quite figure out the difference between, having a bunch of spreadsheets in their Google Drive as compared to, using a platform that not only backs up their data, that provides a lot more functionality. So part of the conversation is, from my side, and I am a neuroscientist, so I'm not a software engineer, but trying to convince folks that your life will be better if you just use these tools. So that's been, but what has happened is one of the groups, and this may have to do with the fact that these microbiome analyses generate a lot of data, and many of the pipelines are relatively straightforward to implement. So interestingly, the groups that are working on the microbiome analysis of the aquifers have been very keen to use all of the tools. So I think the lessons learned are that, and I'd be interested to hear other folks' thought. I think Google Drive has not really been our friend in this business, because it provides, at least for folks here at the University of Hawaii, kind of endless storage space for which they have to design their own kind of storage design, if you could call it that. So it gives people just a place to dump their data, but then oftentimes we hear that their work is slowed down because their data isn't well organized. So there's those two things. And then there's others that just trying to seeing to take the time out to learn how the software actually works is often difficult. And we've learned that creating little walkthrough movies and help things and stuff like that does not work as well as just bringing people into a room and running a workshop and then having them learn how to use the tools. So that's been more successful. Interestingly, one of our longer-term goals is the fact that we have adopted this framework as a way to build these different kinds of science gateways for our different sets of investigators. One of the things that we're really interested in is to figure out how we can leverage, say, the system that we built for one project and migrate it into a system for another project. So that part has been an interesting discussion, and I've just been interested to see some of the investigators see the value immediately. Others really require a lot of convincing, and especially with graduate students. The other part that I think I've noticed that was a little bit more surprising to me is the amount at which people kind of trust the reliability of Google Drive and their own infrastructure in their laptops as being long-term preservation devices. So there have been some successes and some not so good things that have happened with that. Let's see. Oh, so one of the techniques that I've used, so I also serve as the director of Cyberinfrastructure, and we work a lot with our investigators, not whether they need to use a science gateway or not, in terms of using some of our computing resources and also the support from our team. And what I found that works the best is, you can have a website and send out flyers and stuff, but what has really worked the best for me is really one-on-one engagement. Reaching out to an investigator, welcoming them to the institution, and sitting down and asking them what their needs are. That is my job at the university. But what I found is, as soon as you start talking to someone about accessing, say, a computing thing, you find out all kinds of things about how their data is organized, whether the networking works for them, and you just learn a whole bunch of stuff. But I think trying to gather that information, you can gather information through surveys and stuff, I think that works, but it's really the personal touch that seems to build those relationships most closely. So I covered a lot of ground. Mostly I'd be interested in taking some questions. Sandra, did you want me to comment on anything else? Anything else you'd like me to share with the folks?
So no, thank you very much. That especially also the last topics, this personal interaction that you learned from,
Yeah.
even if you send out flyers and everything. I think that is the lesson learned. What also shows Julian's story, just this face-to-face interaction is often so beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, any questions for Gwen? So let me scroll up in the chat. Not that I overlook something. And I see, oh, yeah, so Jack had also earlier one question, and that is maybe something our speakers, yeah, Julian and also Gwen, can take a position to. So he asked, speaking of a widely distributed community and or portfolio of resources, does SGI have any plans to add large gateways ambassadors that are not necessarily focused on a specific institution and aligned with regional RAN or specific discipline, for example? So my answer would be yes. I don't see that there must be something at an institution, but it could be a distributed network that we can work together because it's expertise and not always computational resources. But happy to give this question also to Gwen and Julian.
Yeah, I'll just draw a comparison between another group that I know works really well together, and that's the networking community. Those of you may know about the Quilt and certainly Internet too. So that community has a lot of ambassadors just trying to explain computing to many of their members, and so I guess I see an opportunity to kind of build some bridges between the network folks because typically if you have a science gateway is hooked up to some computing resources, and ultimately it needs to be hooked up to the network. And so they have many communities that are very well, kind of very well formed and have been working together for a long time. I'm thinking like the Great Plains Network, some of the Western regional networks, and others. Educating those folks about what a science gateway is and what it can do for an institution, I think is also something that could happen. But I'm just using that as a comparison. But I think having gateways ambassadors where folks can pull up examples of how these have actually helped their institution, I think it's a great idea, and I think we should do it.
Thank you. Julian?
It's something that I have been following, the experts network, which was a bit like a network of networks. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons I would like to step a little back from the Research Bazaar Arizona particular thing is to see if we could focus more on building more of the satellite networks on different campuses. But that requires having somebody with a sort of larger oversight of multiple organizations and helping with giving people a bit like the Science Gateway ambassadors. They have a toolkit. We started doing something similar with a cookbook. So harvesting those lessons learned from across multiple organizations, and then just doing the Johnny Appleseed thing and spreading the word. That is something that I think could be useful. I think there could be a good positive interaction between the campus specific folks and then people who are sort of cross institutions. So, but I still a little bit vague in my head how that would work, and I don't know if you could scale it in a kind of a in the same way. Could we have a sort of oversight committee? So I'll hopefully in a year or two we'll know how that maybe has worked out. So we'll see.
Yeah, Sandra, I'd be interested to
much.
know. I'd be interested to know from the group how many folks at your campuses know what a science gate. If you say science gateway, does that ring a bell for folks? I know we pounded into the heads of at least one community on campus, but I would say those words, Science Gateway, don't immediately conjure up, what we all know as a Science Gateway.
So I can even also ask myself on the dam. I still know that I haven't reached a critical mass on campus besides STEM. So the people who are collaborating with me know, of course, about Science Gateways, but it's still because of the expression and the term that a lot of humanities are turned away first. If I don't explain that Science Gateway is a concept, but not, because they don't feel addressed by the term Science Gateways. I think it's nothing for them. So that is what I'm still working on to tell them first that it's important.
Oh.
So we have also an answer in the chat from Jack Smith. Very few know about it, and he has also a question. Has Internet 2 or will talk with SGCI about this? So we are in contact with Internet 2 to advertise the Gateway Ambassadors, and we will have a panel on sustainability and science gateways at the next meeting in Indianapolis in March. And there's another, that might be something for you, Gwen. It's data organization is something that seems we all sort stumble through. So, do you see the chat?
Yes. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, and as I was saying before with my comment about Google Drive, I think it's quite a stumbling block, and I think what folks need to think hard about. Well, so two things. One is, we have our NSF data management plans, but they don't necessarily have any teeth. It's not that we won't get another grant if we don't follow our data management plan. But now I think that the need is higher because of the introduction of the FAIR standards in terms of data sharing, and then also journals that are now starting to require that you have a well-curated data product or data set that goes along with your, with your paper. So, if there's, it's always like people don't want to do extra work unless they absolutely have to. But I think, in terms of just working with your students, if you ask them those questions, if you had to do this experiment over again and someone left this data set for you, would you be able to do it? Did you add enough information to make that data valuable? But I think the organization, there's not a simple tool out there like we all use Microsoft Word for word processing. There's lots of different ways of doing it, and I think that's one of the reasons why I like the Science Gateway approach, because at least some of the software framework codes are being maintained by lots of folks. So there's a way to be able to adopt a framework that will support all these things without having to build the whole thing yourself.
I wanted to share one other question that came from Mona. When you guys are working on building out a community, do you find it more challenging to involve the technical folks or the humanities non-technical folks?
I think there's two different challenges with the folks that are, the domain, what I'll call the domain scientists. They're going to be interested. They're interested if you can make their life easier, but you also have to hold their hand, pretty well. This is my experience. You have to hold their hand through to just demonstrate, oh, look, this will make your life much easier. You'll be able to do all this stuff. As soon as they see some kind of improvement over the way that they're doing stuff now, or it saves them time or makes their work more reliable or easier to do, I think that's where you get them. I think for technical people, oftentimes when you engage another set of technical folks, they'll say, well, I wouldn't have built the database that way. I would have used this other framework. So that's a completely different set of discussions that you have. Or, you know, why do I need this? I have all this stuff in GitHub, so I'm all set. I mean, I think that works for some things, but not other. And I'm looking at Jack's comment. Yes, the data management plans rarely get any budget and proposals to actually implement them. You know, that I would say is really, that is happening at the level of panel review. So it's up to all of us who review, you know, who are on the NSF panels to ask those questions. I think things are changing a little bit. So if someone says, I'm going to build a mammoth database and a giant visualization platform, and they don't include any funds for any software engineers, and no one has that expertise, those kinds of things I think are, you know, especially when the proposal goes into more of a domain area rather than a computer science area in terms of NSF. I think those things are starting to get called out more now. But I think the challenge is who on. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. So yeah, one thing is, for example, I talked to one of the NSF research officers, yeah, being responsible for the CSSI program, also in the future, and creating the panels, and she really said she would like to see more technical people directly there, like research software engineers, and they don't have to have a PhD.
Right.
So, because it's about sustainability of software and technical solutions. So I really like that they're open now, that people don't have to be faculty or PhDs. I think that is a great message.
Yeah, and I guess what I would like to see, so I'm familiar, you know, with funding within the EPSCoR, with some of the EPSCoR proposals that get funded, and it really depends on who is in the panel, who is a cyber infrastructure expert on the panel that's reviewing, you know, a bunch of those proposals, because oftentimes someone will review and give high marks for the science, but they won't have the expertise to actually review whether this, you know, whatever they put out to manage the data or analyze the data, whether that part of the proposal will actually work or not. So just having folks that really understand, you know, software development. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think oftentimes that happens.
Absolutely, yeah. So I don't want to interrupt the discussion. I only would like to show another 3-4 slides regarding the Gateway ambassadors, and then we can, you know, continue the discussion.
Great.
So because, yeah, we have seen the different approaches of different campuses, and there are already many more. And yeah, we have these pillars already, like a community building landscape. And I think Gateway ambassadors could really fill gaps as community builders to connect these pillars to each other and have one central point where people can really exchange experiences, share knowledge in a community. And so, and SGCI services can also fill some gaps if there are gaps on campus, for example, for experts. If a campus says, oh, we don't have a usability expert, but SGCI could help with that and help to say, yeah, you can book the services from SGCI. So join the Gateway ambassadors. So there's a Get Started toolkit we created. So one is, yeah, join our community and explore the resources. So how to, for example, get started on your campus. So I created a slide deck where definitions for Science Gateway or a definition for usability. So you can drag and drop them together if you want to show something on campus. There is some reading, some publications, and there's an email group. So if you go to sciencegateways.org, the gateway/ambassadors, you can find this toolkit. Yeah, there's a PowerPoint slide deck you can download, as I said, and flyers. So for your campus, and these flyers you can adapt for your own own campus. So we have, if you look at the left side, it's you have a layout. SGCI has its logo on there. It explains a little bit. Do you need help with data collections or maybe modeling, simulation, and visualization tools? And then everyone can adapt it for their own campus with a contact box. You put your email and your phone number in. And if you like the layout, we could help also, with other flyers. And hope that everyone who's on the call would like to join the community. And I know already. So Gwen, use the possibility to make one of her team members join the community. This is, of course, also great. So thank you very much for that. So now I would give it maybe back to discussions. Are there any questions? The data management plans, we already discussed that.
I have a question. So
okay, that's good.
I'm going to ask the people who are still on the call. And I like to ask this question because different groups of people have different answers. What we're doing is not new. I would love to know about models for what other people have tried and have seen work, and might ideally maybe have personal experience with growing something like a community on campus, as well as maybe a community between campuses. I would love to learn about other people's lessons learned. So any ideas or pointers? I mean, if you can't think about it now, feel free to send me an email. Actually, I'll pop my email in here.
Thank you, Julian.
Yeah, and thank you. Definitely a special thank you to Annelie, Julian, and Gwen for excellent presentation, and thank you, Sandra, for pulling this together. I think it was very informative and great to see all the different examples from different institutions around the U.S. A little bit about what to expect for the start of 2020. Our next webinar is going to be January 8th at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific, about using TAPIS APIs for portable, reproducible, high-performance computing in the cloud, which is a part one of a series about gateway platforms. So hope to have a webinar after that about the Hub Zero platform, and then an additional webinar about Apache Theravada. Thank you all for spending an hour with us.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.